Welcome to the Oshawa Community Museum podcast with your host, Melissa Cole.
Hello, this is Melissa Cole, curator of the Oshawa Community Museum. The next 12 monthly podcasts will feature artifacts from the collection that have an interesting story attached to them. Each month I will discuss a different artifact. I'd like to thank you for joining me today. The first artifact that is being featured is the walking wheel, which is also known as the Great Wheel. It is currently on display in the kitchen of Henry House. The Great Wheel was an earlier type of spinning wheel that was used to spin wool for items such as clothing, blankets, and other housewares. The fibers, which were gathered from the family's livestock, were held in the left hand, while the wheel was slowly turned with the right. This wheel is good for using a long draw spinning technique, which requires only one active hand most of the time, thus freeing a hand to spin the wheel. The wheel stands about 5 feet in height and contains a surprisingly complex system to create the spun wool. The largest wheel turns a much smaller spindle assembly, with the spindle revolving many times for each turn of the drive wheel. The yarn is then spun at an angle and stored on the spindle. To begin spinning on the wheel, first a leader, or a length of waste yarn, is tied onto the base of a turning spindle and spiraled up to the tip. The spinner overlaps a handful of fiber with the leader, holding both gently together with the left hand. They begin to slowly turn the large drive wheel clockwise with the right hand, while simultaneously walking backward and drawing the fiber in the left hand, away from the spindle at an angle. The walking motion of the spinner is where the name walking wheel comes from. The spinner must ensure that their left hand controls the tension on the wool to produce an even result. Once a sufficient amount of yarn has been made, the spinner turns the wheel backward a short distance to unwind the spindle. They then turn it clockwise again and wind the newly made yarn onto a spindle, finishing the wind on by spiraling back out to the tip again to make another draw. This particular artifact arrived at the museum in the late 1960s. It originally belonged to Mrs. David Fleming, who used this wheel for over 70 years of her life while she lived in a cabin north of Cobourg. In the summer of 2011, Mrs. Fleming's great-granddaughter came to see the walking wheel that her great-grandmother had used. While at the museum that day, she provided me with a photograph of Mrs. David Fleming pictured beside her walking wheel, and she also presented with me a poem that was written by Mrs. David Fleming on April 14th, 1914 in Cobourg, Ontario. I will share that poem with you now. I'm putting you away, my dear old wheel, with an aching pain in my heart, and in spite of all that I can do, the tears from my eyes will start. We've been friends for over 60 years. Day by day I've walked by your side, drawing the threads of fleecy wool with a happy, contented pride. And you and I together have made the yarn for mitts and hose, which kept hands and feet of my children warm, protected from frost and snows. The years roll on with ceaseless tread, and no change have they brought to you. But I, dear old wheel, have grown old and gray, and far from as good as new. The bloom of youth has left my cheek, and from my step is less sprightly than then, and for I am some years past the mark of my 60. When I am gone, who will love you, my wheel, as I so long have done, and who will walk by your side and spin the wool as I have done? Some ruthless hand may break and burn and put you out of the way, and the thought makes me sigh with an ache in my heart as I put you away today. The hum and buzz of you, dear old wheel, has been music to my ears. If you wish to view this artifact, you can do so by visiting us down at the lake in Oshawa. We are open from Tuesday to Friday and on Sundays from 12 p.m. to 4 p.m. Be sure to come to Guy House, the yellow-framed building, to start your tour. Thank you for joining me today on my very first podcast.